I would classify myself as a youth advocate, and right now I work with the DC Children and Youth Investment Trust Corporation, but have been doing youth advocacy work for the past 17 years. For the past 17 years, I've been a youth advocate, and so the way that I'm going to answer the question is kind of talking a little bit about my whole history of work versus limiting it to just where I work right now. So I started out actually doing youth advocacy work right after I graduated from college, and I always hated school. Kind of that was the place that I started. I grew up in DC, born and raised in DC. Went to DC public schools, graduated from Banneker, and I hated school. No offense to Banneker, but I hated school my whole life because I just felt like young people weren't ever given the opportunities to really shine and be who they wanted to be. And so, especially because I was an artist at heart, I really wanted to be able to have the opportunity to do art, and I never was able to do it, especially seeing how schools and especially low-income communities were, and the opportunities for young people in low-income communities. Being raised in Anacostia right when crack was hitting the streets, it was something that I saw around me all the time, and people just did not have opportunity. And I knew that I wanted more for myself, and I knew that our community deserved better. And so I kind of made the personal vow to change that, and to have my life's work be dedicated to that. And so when I graduated from college, I went into teaching, and I started teaching actually in San Francisco, an urban school in San Francisco. Then taught in New York City public schools, and then came back to DC. All of the work that I've done has been work around helping empower young people to express their voices, to find their internal creativity, and also to really critically analyze the worlds around them and to create change, whatever change they want to see for themselves and for their communities, to create that change. So again, I did that work in public schools, in urban public schools around the country, but also working with the Earth Conservation Corps, which is an organization here in Southeast DC that works especially with what they call the disconnected youth. So it's youth who are between the ages of 17 and 24, who have either been incarcerated, who dropped out of school, who have kind of gotten off the right track, helping them to rediscover who it is that they are and to reconnect to their communities, and find a way to create change in their communities. That organization specifically did it around environmental activism around the Anacostia River, which is one of the most toxic rivers in the country. But then when and what I was doing there was running a youth media program. So to me, youth media or media is one of the most powerful ways that anybody can express themselves, but especially for young people whose voices are never heard in the mainstream media, especially low-income youth of color whose voices are even more rarely heard. Having young people learn how to use media, how to use the powers of critical thinking and investigative journalism to create change. That's really what I was trying to do. And then when I left Earth Conservation Corps, I moved to the DC Public Library and also created a youth media program, youth radio program called Youth 202 throughout the DC Public Library system, again, for young people to be able to use media as a way to inform each other about things going on in the city, to look at the news that was coming out of mainstream media and to say, okay, well, this is what the Washington Post is saying about this thing, but actually here's what the young people think about this thing. So really helping young people to use media as a way to create change. Now in my current position at the DC Children and Youth Investment Trust Corporation, I help community-based organizations and government agencies that work with youth come together, form partnerships to help leverage resources to best be able to meet the needs of young people in the city. So it's a different kind of work, but it's still work to make an impact for the lives of children and youth in DC. Building relationships is a really critical piece to doing any kind of work. And so especially for me, I'll go back to when I first started working with young people, working as a youth advocate. So I was working at a school in a community in San Francisco called Bayview Hunters Point. And Bayview Hunters Point is a neighborhood that was located right by a power plant. And so literally there were 2 or 3 smokestacks, and San Francisco was very hilly, and so the school was located on the top of a hill. Well, at the bottom of that hill was where the smokestacks were. So the smokestack height was right where the school was. And so whenever the wind blew, the smoke from the smokestacks would blow onto the school and onto the community that was located on top of that hill. So there was an incredibly high rate of asthma in that community and an incredibly high rate of breast cancer in the community. So this was at a time, this was in the late 1990s, the concept of environmental justice was just beginning to take shape, especially in that particular community, and that was all low income. So it was the projects, and it was the neighborhood in San Francisco where whenever I told people where I worked, they were like, "Oh, you work in Bayview?" And so there was this big stigma around it. But I thought that it was really important that the young people knew about what was happening in the community. So we went to the power plant. We did walking tours around the community to look at how many trees are here versus how many trees are in kind of the wealthier neighborhoods of San Francisco. We formed partnerships with, there was an organization, I think it was called something for environmental justice, AJE or AEJ or something. I was a young teacher at that time. I think I was like 22 years old or something, and I had no training, so I was coming in as an inexperienced teacher to a low-income school that had very high needs, but I made it my job to really reach out to as many partners as I could, especially in that community, because I knew that those young people needed to be connected to resources in the community, and to also be able to see the community outside of just the neighborhood that they live in, but also I knew that that was the best way for the young people to really be able to get the best education. So any opportunity that I could grab hold of there, again, people laugh at me when I say that one of the biggest field trips that we took was to the city dump, but I wanted the young people to see, okay, this is the trash cycle. This is, like you live right next to the dump. Here's what goes on in the dump. Here's, the trash from all of these different neighborhoods in the city comes here. We talked to some artists who were creating art out of trash. And then we ended up doing a whole 6-month environmental justice project that was inspired by them. They were asking, we went to the dump and they were asking all these questions like, well, how come people throw away all of this stuff? Well, how come they picked this neighborhood to be the neighborhood where the dump is? Or why did they build the projects around this neighborhood? So their questions led them to other questions. And so all of the questions that they asked led to other partnerships. So in order for them to find the answers, I didn't just say, open up a book and say, okay, here's the answer to your question. No, it was about, you have this question, who can we identify in the city to help you answer your question? And we formed partnerships that way. So that was one example of how in the classroom, partnerships really important. When I did work at the Earth Conservation Corps, again, partnerships was a big thing. So kind of one of the strategies that I use in my work is a strategy that's called inquiry-based learning. So basically it's take the students out into the world and really engage them in a process where they're looking, like critically looking at what it is that they see and asking questions from that, and then their questions form the center of whatever research or whatever project we do. So at Earth Conservation Corps, again, using media, we'd go out into the community, we would do community mapping. They would ask questions like, well, why is stuff like this in Berry Farm, and then when you go across the city to Georgetown, or when you go across the city to Tinley, things look a completely different way. And so again, through that process of asking questions, it says, okay, well, the people who we need to ask are X, Y, Z, these people in the community, and form partnerships with them so they can, answer the questions that the young people have. Also, there's so much more power in a partnership than there is in an individual. I will be the first to admit, there's so many things that I don't know. I'm not an expert at hardly anything, nothing really am I an expert at. But when I partner with an organization that's a media production organization, when I partner with an organization that is a journalism program, when I partner with a person who has great expertise in some other aspect of technology, then all of those resources come together, and that makes the experience richer. Because me individually, I don't have the time, I don't have the personal resources, and I don't have the expert knowledge. I'd be doing people an injustice to just make me and my knowledge the center of everything. And it's also, the world doesn't work that way. The world doesn't work in the way where it's just one individual that's changing the world. It's all about what we collectively can do to make things happen. The ways that I've accessed resources, again, partnering with other organizations or with other groups has always been really key to me accomplishing anything. I'll give one primary example of the work that we did at DC Public Library. So DC Public Library for a while had been struggling with how to get more teenagers into the doors, and so they started a teen employment program called the Teens of Distinction Program. Well, the Teens of Distinction Program had just been started. There was really no program. It was literally just, let's hire some teens and let's make sure that the librarian, the managers are each assigned a teenager. Well, but aside from that, there was no program. So I had to build that program. One of the first things that we did was partner with Urban Alliance, which is a youth workforce organization in DC, to come in and help teach the new teen employees all of the skills about how to really be successful in the workplace. Well, a lot of the teens were saying, well, we don't know how to manage our money. Like when we get this paycheck, we need to know how to set up a bank account. We need to know how, what are all these taxes that we have to pay? I don't understand this. So bring in the Financial Literacy Foundation to teach about that. The young people were saying, well, we need more programs in the libraries. So what kinds of programs do you want? Well, people really need to know about relationships. So can we have an organization to come and talk about how to build a healthy relationship? Okay, so we bring in the DC Rape Crisis Center, we bring in Planned Parenthood. So through asking the young people what it is that they want and need, go out into the city and find those resources to bring in so that the questions get answered and the needs get met. One of the big things the teens said was, there is no place in the city where we can go to find out what's happening, what events are happening around the city for young people. Where can I take my date on a Friday night for $5? What kinds of after school programs, volunteer opportunities, jobs are there out there? All of the media that exists in the city is for adults. There's nothing for young people. So I was like, okay, well, we can create that. So we used Twitter in order to comb the Twitter sphere and find all the different things people are tweeting about. So they will retweet that. They wanted to form a youth radio program. Well, the library doesn't have a radio program, so we partnered with an organization that does have a radio program, a group called Radio Roots. We needed some equipment, so we partnered with another organization to get some equipment into the space so that the teens had a recording studio. They had the video, the audio, all of the computers they needed. So none of that stuff could have happened just solely through the library. It was all in partnership and bringing outside resources in.
How did you persevere despite persistent challenges?
So challenges are just a part of life. And I think for me, the way that I've persevered through challenges is just knowing that the work that needs to be done is so much more important than any challenges that exist. And I think also, just knowing, especially in DC, so much stuff in DC is so political, and there's so many systems, these bureaucratic systems that exist. It takes months, sometimes years, for things to change. I've always been an idealist, and I've always been one of those people to be like, well, why can't this happen right now? I mean, it makes sense for it to happen, and we have the resources for it to happen. Why can't it happen? And I didn't really understand just the value of building relationships with people, A, and B, that moving large systems really takes an extraordinary amount of time, because it's not just about what I want and what you want. It's about you and your supervisor and your the legal constraints that your supervisor has and the money that exists, and in order for this money to be here, the city council has to approve it. In order for city council to approve it, the federal government has to approve it. So it's not just me and what I want and what I think should happen, or not what the teens want and what needs to happen. It's all of these systems that have to happen. So I think just recognizing that the end vision is so much more important than whatever temporary frustration I might be experiencing in that moment. But B, just the recognition that, okay, there's so many systems that are involved in this. Just constantly remembering that this takes time, and that it take baby steps sometimes, baby steps. And sometimes you take a few baby steps forward and then you get one huge step back. But then you just keep taking baby steps forward. So it's just remembering that I think has been able to keep me going. And again, just knowing that really I am just a vessel for what the young people want. I'm the person who helps to figure out how to get what they want done. And I'm the person who helps empower them to be able to pick up this themselves and to do it. So also knowing that, remembering who I'm working for. I'm working for the young people. I'm not working for myself. I think that also has been a motivator for me. I've done work in San Francisco, in New York City, and in Washington, D.C. All of those places have completely different kinds of demographics, both racially and socioeconomically. I think for me, as I've grown as a youth advocate and as I've grown doing work on behalf of and with young people, for me, my knowledge and awareness of how to work with different kinds of people has changed. And I don't mean different kinds of people in the racial sense. Like when we think about diversity, at least a lot of times I would automatically think of race. But how I would define it now is, again, socioeconomic diversity, education diversity, being able to work with people who are on different levels of power. So in my current position, I have to work with people who have a lot of power. So literally daily, I talk to the directors of major government organizations and with the deputy mayors for the city. So I work with the deputy mayor for Health and Human Services, Bibi Otero. I work with the deputy mayor for Public Safety and Justice, Paul Quander. And so they're at this very high level of operation. They have very limited amounts of time. So when I go talk to them, I can't, I have to have my speech and the message that I want to deliver, or the information that I need to get, I have to have that down. So I've had to learn how to work with and operate with people who have from very different diverse levels of power, and who therefore have very different levels of need in terms of how information needs to be communicated, and how much preparedness I need to have to go in to talk to them. So when I talk to deputy mayors, how I look is different. So I'm wearing my power suit. I have my briefs all in a folder. Again, my speech is down pat. I don't talk slang, like my accent is under control, all of those different things. It's like I code switch. When I go to talk to young people at a school, or when I do, and I don't mean you young people, but when I go to do kind of like focus groups with young people, I'm not dressed in my power suit, because I know that that's sometimes seen as a barrier. When I go talk to a nonprofit organization, I shift my message a little bit because I'm working with, they have a different set of needs. So for me, being able to understand not just, okay, what's one group's needs, or what's one group's kind of context, being able to shift and know how to work with different kinds of groups of people has been really important. And I've been learning that as I've gone along, because all different kinds of people have different kinds of needs. when you join forces with other groups of people, you have more power because there's more people involved, there's more resources involved. In some ways, it also kind of makes things trickier because one group might not have the same goals or motivations as you do. But that also can make things, it also helps bring more of a broader perspective to the picture. So I operate out of my particular context, and the young people that I've worked with operate out of their particular context. When we work with another group of people from, another city or another area of the city who might have a different context, then that helps to say, oh, well, wait, I've been seeing things like this, but really they're like this. So in some ways it helps to broaden the vision, to help people, to let people know that this is the way that you're seeing things is not the only way to see things. There are other ways to look at it. But again, it also makes things a little bit trickier because you might go into a situation thinking that this is going to be how it goes down, and this is what you want, and this is how it's going to go down. And then you get with another group of people, and they have a completely different take on things, and it's like, oh wait, we might not be able to get what we want done now. It might take a little bit longer for us to work through our questions. We might have to ask for more things. We might have to make some compromises. And so it's a general answer to your question, because I'm just trying to think of all of the different contexts that I've worked in. So partnering with other organizations and other people has helped broaden how we see the picture, but also led to more compromise, which in some cases is good, and in some cases it's like, dang, we just need to be going for this, but it's part of the process.